Hello. Boom, boom, boom. I love that piece of music. I want to tell you about it as a way of introducing this topic. So thank you for popping by. That's Recuerdos de la Alhambra. In 1974, my father and I left mother and two sisters outside, and he and I went into the Alhambra Palace in Granada. 1974. Franco was still in power. And he and I wandered through this palace, this Arabic palace. It's just stunning. And that piece is called Recuerdos de la Alhambra, the memories of the Alhambra. It's written by one of my favourite guitar composers, Francesco Tarrega. And Tarrega died in 1909. He wrote it a few years before his death, and he was remembering his first public performance, his debut as a stunning guitarist, which was in the Alhambra Palace, probably 40 or 30 years beforehand, because he was only in his late 50s when he died. So anyway, so the memory part, the romanticism, I have that candle over there. Don't worry about turning and looking at it, but I have the candle, and it's one of those pieces that I'll often play late at night, just because that's when it should be played in my mind. And I want to talk about somebody else who was doing something very good in 1974. This book was published in 1974. Footsteps into the Future. Diagnosis of the Present World and a Design for an Alternative. Rajni Kothari. You would be forgiven me introducing these off the bookshelf talks to think that all futurists come from America, for instance. You know, Alvin Toffler, and then Clem Bezos, and Jim Data, and so on. And of course, some of the key early futurists were Americans. Don't want to take that away from them, but it wasn't just Americans. Kothari is a very influential Indian thinker. He described himself as a futurist. And interestingly enough, his two sons are still alive and practicing futurists. Kothari died in his late 80s in 2015. I want to tell you a little bit about this book and link it up and start joining dots, I guess. The whole point of having a library and having a memory that goes with the library is that everything in our lives is in fact intertextual. Everything weaves together. You can't read that book without some other reference points popping in. Just the same as when you have conversations with people. Human beings, and the human mind is not stuck in here and solitary. It is constantly in dialogue with the world, and if you're an academic like me, it's also in dialogue with the voices from the past and the present. Kothari has been dead for 10 years coming up. I can still engage with his work. And that's one of the gratifying things about text. Of course, there's also orality. I can recall stories that I was told about my grandfather and so on from my father, and I can tell my son or whoever else comes along. So those stories are also ways of transmitting experience. But anyway, this is Futures 101, right? So I should stay on track. So, Design for the Future. He begins with a very interesting statement, and I have to squint a little bit because I went and broke my other glasses. So I'm wearing my older glasses here, and I'm going trying to focus clearly. But I really like this opening statement. There are a few things here from this book that I want to share with you. I want to start off though with his broadside. This is what he's out to do. There is a dilemma that faces the futurist, he says. As a reformer and a romantic. I really like that. Which every futurist must be. He is guided, 1974, so all references to people or human beings as the he. He is guided by a vision whose fundamental credo is how to leave the past behind and remold the present forwards towards a different world. As a skeptic and a scientist, however, he knows that a total break with the past is both an impossible and a dangerous proposition. And that all he can hope for is to have and leave a better world. I think that's rather beautiful. It's also rather, there's a certain sadness to it, a tragic quality to it. But, you know, this is where he's starting out. But he takes a historical perspective. So he wants to leave the past behind. The past that we need to leave behind is the past of conditioned, passive responses to the world around us. Okay, so he moves on from that position and makes a number of other points. I've got also, I could spend a lot of time unpacking this book. It's been great to revisit it actually for this course. And he said, there are moments in history when long needed changes which were only dimly felt for decisions and vividly felt and offer a chance of being carried out. Okay, so dimly felt for decisions. Decisions dimly felt for decades. It wasn't making any sense to me. It's horrible glasses. Vividly felt. Okay, and that's really important. So these things that have been brewing inside us. Now he's feeling that we are being pushed along in history. There's a momentum to modernity. And as an Indian, he can feel that particularly because, of course, it's had colonial repercussions and implications for India's past, but also its present. 1974, Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister then, okay? And it was through Indira Gandhi, that he actually stepped away from politics because he saw the disaster of what was called the emergency when she declared martial law and threw out all forms of consultative democracy for a period of a year and a half or so. And that really disillusioned him. But what he's seeking for here is a sense of future possibilities. It is romantic and it is deeply imaginative. So he says the present is such a moment when this pressure of decades and so on is pushing us forward. It provides a peculiar combination of necessity born out of a sense of crisis. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That the human species may become extinct, for instance, because he's looking at nuclear annihilation. And hope. So crisis and hope, he says, born out of accumulating evidence, okay, that if only man, again, would be prepared to act, okay, to do. This is so key to Future's work. It is possible to move towards a better human order. That's, if you look at go back to this, and a design for an alternative. So much of this book is like a manifesto of things that he sees could happen. I'm not going to touch on that because a lot of it now is dated. But what I'm interested in here, and this is an intertextual thing, is picking up on Jenny Gidley's book, which has got even smaller text, so I'm going to be going like that. Now, Jenny Gidley, wonderful futurist. She has a great website, and you can look this up. The Future, a very short introduction, is published by Oxford Uni Press. But, you know, she's making a very similar point, and I have to go back a page to find it. And this is in 2017. So Let's see if I can stumble my way through this. So in spite of the potential for catastrophe, same sort of tone, isn't it, that current trends suggest, we are also in the best position ever to turn negative trends around through the means at our disposal. As a species, we have never been more conscious, more globally connected, or more capable of radical positive change than we are today. 1974, 2017, Futurists are still saying the same kind of thing, and I think that's worth noting. That book's really great. You can also get it as an ebook and so on, and it's not very expensive. I would recommend it to you. Now, I want to close this by jumping to the very end of his book here now, and lots of lines all over here. And so he's a futurist, he's working his imagination, he's also dealing with the structures that he's particularly aware of. He's aware of Western modernist structures of institutions and so on. He's also aware of the grip of certain kind of culture, which he calls Brahmanic culture. That means the Brahmins are the people who know it all. There's an expert-driven culture. It's got references to his own cultural experience as an Indian man, in which the Brahmanic culture still holds on to caste, even though Nehru, for instance, and Congress outlawed caste in 1947, 48, whenever it was, and so on. They legally abolish it, but you go to any village around India, particularly in the 1970s, but even today, and there are still very strong caste structures. So he's wrestling with those kinds of dilemmas that we face. So I'm going to finish off with a couple of other quotes here. There's one that I particularly liked. Here it is. So he's suggesting, of course, that in a sense he's offering a utopian vision, but it's a modest one, he says here, okay? And this won't come about by sheer organisation of knowledge and intelligence, okay? There is nothing certain in the historical process except that men, that's men and women, of course, make it. We make history, okay? That at any rate, in our conception of politics, okay, that sits at his concept of politics, which he defines as this: active intervention in the flow of time. That's really interesting. So politics for him is the active, conscious intervention in the flow of time. It is not what we see most politicians getting up to today, okay? There are moments of great imagination when politicians might step out of that. The apology from Kevin Rudd in Australia might be one example, okay? So there's an active engagement with time. I'm going to skip a few lines. He's referring to Marx and Gandhi and people, Mahatma Gandhi, that is, whom he's definitely a follower of Gandhi's thinking. And there's a lot of admiration for Mahatma Gandhi expressed in this text. So, last bit from me, and then I will leave you to your own thoughts, okay? This makes it incumbent upon the thinking and sensitive strata of this world to actively define goals and the means to achieve them, and to ensure that the professional politicians do not lose sight of the true ends of politics, the active intervention in time, right? It is for such men and women in active association with the political leaders of this world to take the necessary first steps in the direction of their preferred world. So 1978, Jim Data, in that book edited by Clem Bezold on anticipatory democracy, talking about a preferred future. 4 years earlier, Kothari is referring to a preferred world. So the whole thrust of futures thinking then, 1974 and now, is very much about engaging with practical world processes in order to generate the conditions for a preferred world. Visionary, wonderful, inspirational. Thank you.